We need to talk about this Outlier chassis. Let's get into it. What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Shoot More. If you're new, welcome. If you've seen some of the other videos and you're not yet subscribed, please go ahead and hit that button right now. It really lets me know that I'm doing a good job. Now that I've had a substantial amount of time to be behind this Outlier chassis, I want to put out a review, but there's a couple things I want to cover first before getting into specifics. At the top of that list is I paid for this chassis with my own money. Outlier doesn't know I'm making this. They didn't reach out to me. There's no kickbacks or anything. 100% my own money went into this, so these are 100% my own opinions. Speaking of opinions, I have a lot of them, and some of them are nitpicky, but I'm coming from a place of a PRS competitor. There was a couple months ago, I saw a post put out on one of the Outlier pages. They were looking for somebody to shoot their chassis through the PRS season to prove that it was a competitor in the chassis space. It piqued my interest, so I bought one, I wanted to try it, and that's kind of how we ended up here. The TLDR version of this review is I'm not thrilled with the chassis itself. I think there's a lot of competition at similar price points that I would pick before I would pick up one of these again. That being said, opinions, everybody's got one. This is mine. Let's go ahead and get into specifics. So starting from the top with ergonomics and usability, you know, you touch your chassis a lot when you're shooting, whether it's adjusting the bipod, inserting magazines, dropping magazines, running the bolt, you know, manipulating the trigger, adjusting the bag under the bag rider, etc. So that's a really important part that I think they miss the mark on, is that ergonomic piece and that just refinement piece. For instance, there's a lot of sharp edges on this chassis. This bag rider stands out for sure. I can rub my hand on this and almost cut skin with how sharp this bag rider is. Same goes for the forearm channel. You know, there's some sharp edges. These were very quickly machined, probably to keep costs down. So I understand why they made some of the decisions they made, but it does take away from the experience and the pleasure of using the chassis, I guess you could say. That kind of leads me into my second item, which is the 3D printed parts. I love what 3D printers has done for the community for accessories. It's made things a lot cheaper. It's made innovation go a lot faster, I think. But there are times when parts should not be 3D printed. This mag latch is a prime example. It is 3D printed. I had the first one break within a week of having the rifle. Now Outlier did send me another one, no questions asked. They got it to me pretty quick, so I'm very thankful for that. But it's just, they're weak, you know, and this is a high use part. The second thing that's 3D printed on this chassis originally, it was this grip. I hate this thing. This is the most uncomfortable grip I've ever shot with, so much so that I went out and bought one of the MPA vertical grips, took a file to it until it fit, and replaced it. I mean, if you think about it, the grip is the one thing on a chassis that you probably interface with the most. It's gotta be comfortable. That's such a big ticket item. This feels like it's an afterthought, which is a shame because they 3D printed this. If they just would have taken a little bit more time, maybe gotten some more feedback, I think a 3D printed grip is fine. It's just that the design on this one is really subpar, and it doesn't belong on this chassis. The other 3D printed part is the cheek rest. It's fine. It's not the most comfortable or uncomfortable thing in the world. It functions. It doesn't move. Will it break at some point if this thing gets thrown in a truck? Yep, probably. But, you know, that's the nature of the game with 3D printed parts. They're trying to save money, and I get that. So moving forward, starting to look at the design and build quality, one complaint that I have, and it's not just me, is that the forearm flexes a lot. It's made out of relatively thin aluminum. There's a lot of leverage, especially if you've got a heavy barrel on here. If you're trying to load into a bipod or anything like that, it's gonna flex. I actually added my own Arca rail underneath it, which we'll talk about here in a second, in an effort to try and take up some of that flex. It helped, but it's definitely still there. And you know, one of my other, I guess, gripes with this chassis is the bag stop. It's too short to be useful. Like, it catches the top of the bag, but I mean, you've got an MDT mag that sticks down. That's a ton of mag that can get pressed into a bag when you're trying to load into a barricade. It's there, it's a thought, but it just doesn't work well. It definitely needs to be longer, which, you know, on a lot of chassis, the built-in bag stops are short. Totally fine. They probably had to work within the piece of aluminum that they machined this out of. I get that. But on the other chassis, you have an Arca rail that you can attach a aftermarket bag stop to. Probably asking yourself, well, you know, this one has an aftermarket rail. It does, but it stops way short of the back where that backstop is. I mean, you've probably got, what is that, 4 inches of space here where there's no Arca rail, based on how this forearm interfaces with the actual chassis block itself. Action block. Action block? Probably called an action block. Don't quote me on that. It just seems like it would have been a lot easier for them to maybe turn these mounting screws into flush mounts and then run that Arca rail back further. It still wouldn't be all the way back, but you'd still have another 2.5 inches of rail that you could utilize if this entire forearm was milled out for the Arca rail. So that kind of limits the accessories that you can use from that perspective. The other thing that I think is important to call out in terms of the Arca rail is that this is a shallow forearm. So if you want to attach weights or anything, you're going to block the Arca in the spot that you're attaching the M-LOK weights to, unless they are offset. And as far as I know, there's only 1 or 2 companies that make offset weights. I know Outlier just released their own sets of weights. I don't know if they're offset. I'll have to look, but that's just something to be considerate of. If you're trying to load this thing up with weights to get it to balance, you're going to have to add an aftermarket Arca rail on the bottom to drop it down lower to actually be able to access it, because most anything in the M-LOK slots is going to block the factory Arca rail. Moving on to maintenance and setup. So when I say maintenance, I mean maintenance of the rifle. It's frustrating to have to clean the barrel on this thing because you have to drop the cheek riser, and then you have this butt pad which is in the way. This is held on by 2 set screws, and you have to undo the set screws and physically remove the butt pad in order to get a cleaning rod down the bore. Is it the end of the world? No, absolutely not. After you've got it set up once, as long as you kind of run the set screws home good and tight, they're going to make an indent on the metal of the buffer tube so that you'll be able to put them back in the same spot again. But it's just another step. It's more tools. It's more things that you have to get back in place. I don't think this was an ideal setup. I really just don't like this buttstock at all. I think if I had to do it again, I would recommend not getting this buttstock period from Outlier, getting a $20, $30 buffer tube, and then getting like a Luth AR or something like that. Is it going to increase the cost of the chassis? Absolutely. Yes, it will. But I think it's going to be more comfortable and ergonomic for you to shoot, and you're going to end up getting more use out of it in the long run. Speaking of this factory buttstock, it installs with an AR-15 buffer tube castle nut wrench. They don't mention that on their website. They don't sell one on the website, and they don't include one in the kit when you buy the chassis. Now, I've built ARs before, so I had it in my toolbox. It wasn't a big deal. But if you're somebody new, I don't think that's something your average gun owner is going to have that they're going to be able to install this with. Maybe I'm wrong. Like I said, it's kind of nitpicky. You can order one on Amazon. It's not that big of a deal. It just would have been nice if they would have called it out on the website, or at least offered one for sale. Said, hey, you're going to need this to install our factory buttstock. I will give them credit though. They do include some decent quality Allen wrenches to be able to assemble the rest of the chassis. They're long handled, so you can get some decent torque on the fasteners. Props there, you know, is deserved. You don't necessarily always get that nowadays, but the castle nut for the buffer tube was a pain point for me. We've talked a lot about the bad. What about the good? I have to give this thing props. It shoots. You know, this is a cheap barreled action. It fits well. There's no weird movement. The recoil lug seems to lock up well. The barrel action is a factory barreled action. It shoots very well. While the chassis definitely has drawbacks, like the ergonomics may not be the best, or, you know, you've got forearm flex if you're trying to load into a barricade or manipulate a bipod or something like that. At its core, it does what it's supposed to do, holds a barreled action so that you can make good impacts downrange. The question I think that I've been trying to answer for myself as I've used this is, would I recommend it? Or if for myself personally, if I needed another chassis, would I buy it for another platform? And I don't know that I would say yes to that question. So here's the deal. When I bought this a couple months ago, the chassis itself with the discounts and everything, where it was like $430-ish ballpark. YouTube, don't kill me, please. That's gone up by about $200 nowadays, as of this filming, which is mid-June, we'll call it. At the $400-ish price point, I think this chassis, despite its drawbacks, had some advantages over some of the offerings in the market, because when you're at that price, you're really competing with like the KRG Bravo. Not really anything else that's like a dedicated chassis setup. Now that the price has increased on these, you're getting into the territory where you're in the KRG X-Ray, you're in the MDT XRS, you've got the Aerosolus chassis, and you've got the MDT Premier Gen 1 chassis, which can be had for, I don't know, $600-700 used-ish, depending on where you buy them. I think a Gen 1 ACC is light years better than this. There's better adjustability in the stock. It's got a bunch of aftermarket support with weights and internals and accessories. It's just a better platform, and it's a better place. I would personally recommend spending money. If I was to have to buy another one of these today for the price that they're going for currently, I would not. And it's unfortunate, you know, I don't want to dog on Outlier. I think they're trying to do good things. Competition in the market is great for us as consumers. I think if they made some slight tweaks to this platform, they could really have something that was competitive. But as it sits right now for this Gen 1 unit, I'm not super impressed, especially now given that they've raised their prices. That is something I want to note though. They've been teasing upgrades to these. I don't know if to call it a Gen 2 or, you know, a Gen 1.2. They haven't really said, but I've kind of been watching some of their marketing materials, and I'm catching glimpses of changes to the chassis. Specifically, the ones that I've seen have thumb rests, or at least screws for thumb rests on this right-hand side. So I know that they're taking some of this feedback in. I'm not the only person that's had these thoughts and opinions. We'll see what the future holds. I just hope that they don't release a Gen 2 and then bump the price up again, because they're just going to be pricing themselves out of the market, personally. I think if you are a coyote hunter and you're looking for a chassis that, you know, you could lock into a tripod, you're just somebody that wants something that looks cool to go to the range, that's, you know, not super expensive, and you can find one used, yeah, sure, you know, I could see giving it a shot if that was the criteria. But if you're any kind of serious shooter, I would look elsewhere. So I think that pretty much covers it. I hope you guys appreciate it. I know this is probably going to ruffle some feathers. You know, my opinion's worth what you paid for it. Thanks for watching again, and I will catch you guys next time.